Welcome everybody to another episode of vBrownBag US. Tonight we have Ryan Johnson and Nick Marshall who are going to talk to us about VMware validated designs. This is a multi-session topic. We're not sure if it's going to be 2 or 3 sessions, but you are seeing part 1. So quick notes, if you want to get in on the conversation, we have handles. We have several shows on several time zones. You can see that at vBrownBag, at vBrownBag Latam, at vBrownBag EMEA. And we have a Twitter hashtag vBrownBag. You can ask questions at any time. We are monitoring it in real time. You can ask questions if you are joining us on the show right now. We're also answering questions through the GoToMeeting interface. You can see the times for those other vBrownBags, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Ryan Johnson, who is at 10:30 a.m. in Twitter. Ryan, go ahead and tell us hi.
Yeah, so good morning, good evening from around the world, across the globe. I still remember that from the community podcast days. So my name is Ryan Johnson. I'm a staff architect in our integrated systems business unit, and I focus on pretty much all things software-defined data center. And tonight when Nick joins, Nick said he'd be a little bit late, but we're going to talk about the VMware Valley design for the software-defined data center, one of our specific VMware Valley designs. But we're going to give you kind of an overview of what the VDDs, as we call them for short, are, why they're important, and kind of give you a little bit of background and history. And then we're going to start peeling back the onion about the VVD for SDDC, the current release, give you a tech preview on some early access stuff that we've already released on the communities that you can download. So you got to get a preview of what's coming in the next release, because I can share that. And I'm happy to answer any questions along the way. We have about 3 weeks to kind of go through all this material, so we can take it at a nice leisurely pace, ask questions. Happy to be very interactive. So
Excellent. And we're 2 hosts tonight. I'm Ariel Sanchez. Kyle Rudy is with us at KM Rudy on Twitter. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sitting in as co-host here, helping out Ariel. Outside of here, you may know me from doing some VMware stuff. I do technical marketing there, and I'll be here answering questions and heckling Ryan.
Excellent. And finally, while we do have the microphone silenced right now, if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. We'll open up the microphone so you can have your question answered in real time. With that, Ryan, I'll make you presenter, and it's your show.
All right. Let's see if this works. Share my screen. All right. You guys see this thing?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, like I said, we are here tonight to talk about the VMware Valley designs for the software-defined data center. So if you see this logo, little icon floating around, you'll know that represents VDDs. You'll see it floating around some of our documentation, some of our graphics and such that we do. But that just basically denotes that it's a VVD, right? But we're specifically going to talk about the VMware Valley design for the software-defined data center. And I'm just going to throw out the disclaimer, because some things may change, because I do have some early access pieces that we have publicly released on our community, but things are subject to change before the actual GA. Again, just a quick introduction. Ryan Johnson, I'm a staff tech marketing architect, so I work in tech marketing, different BU than Kyle, but I focus on all things around specifically the VMware validated designs, and as well as VMware Cloud Foundation, multiple certifications on the VMware stack. If you want to email me, Jonathan Ryan at VMware, you can find me on Twitter at 1030am or 1030am.org. Don't ask me where the name came from. It's a short story. All right, and Nick is supposed to be joining us. Everyone pretty much knows Nick, who Nick is, but those that don't, he's a senior SDOC integration architect in the same BU as I work in. He's an architect and actually works on the architecture for the VMware Valley designs, and he's written numerous books from the Mastering vSphere Series 5 and 6, and lab guides, and also the vBrownBag host. So he should be joining us shortly. He's leaving me in the dust. So first thing I want to do is kind of start out and ask questions along the way. Kyle, Ariel, just let me know if anything comes up you want me to answer. But let's talk about kind of what the VMware validated designs are and how they're different from other things you may see out there. So the whole kind of point from VMware validated designs are really kind of at a program level within our business unit. And their whole mission in life, because I will actually use that word life, that's a very important term, is that they're prescriptive blueprints, right? And to how to build how to comprehensively deploy as well as operate a software-defined data center based on the VMware technologies. So they're very prescriptive. There's ways and areas where we can allow some deviation, and we can talk about those through these 3 weeks. But they're very comprehensive. They tell you exactly how to implement it with some very specific guidance, some very specific design objectives and design decisions. And they are also provide a lot of operational practices. Our entire intent here is to look at the industry and say, how can we help customers deploy the software-defined data center at a more rapid rate, right? How can we make it easier for them to deploy and know that, it's going to be supported, it can scale to certain numbers, it provides certain availability, scalability, numbers, and be kind of a proven, solid technology, but not something that can just last for now, but can continually be improved upon, right, in an iterative fashion. So that's really kind of where we're building the standardized design model that the customers can use. Our experts and our folks out in the community can use these as a way to deploy the software-defined data center. But, if it doesn't exactly fit your requirements, I also look to the community and say, this is a fantastic learning opportunity for you guys. And I would highly encourage you, even if you don't plan to use the VBD in an organization or, one of your customers, begin to read it, because you will glean a lot of information about how we think about the software-defined data center and how VMware sees it being architected. Like I said, me and Nick work on a constant basis, and we're taking feedback from all manners of, like I say, all manners of lesser imps and demons, but basically pulling feedback from my field, right? Our partners, our customers, the community, helping to design the best standardized design we can for the SDOC. And when I say they're proven robust, right? We put these things through its cycles. We have a whole team built within our BUs that are constantly scale testing, right, and validation testing. We have test harnesses that are constantly testing these designs based on how we build them to ensure that they're going to live up to the scalability numbers, the load numbers, and everything that we publish and we document, and that you know that it's going to be a design that will last based on what we say we're going to provide you. Talking about a lot of different broad use cases that these designs can support. VBD is at a base level, kind of really a foundation. But it's one thing to deploy the software-defined data center, which we all are here. We all cut our teeth on building, infrastructure and solutions. But for businesses, it's got kind of a different context, right? Why are you deploying an SDDC? What is the intent for that SDDC? And at the end of the day, how is it differentiating your business? Some companies, if you deploy infrastructure, maybe that infrastructure will, differentiate your business. Maybe you're a service provider. But for a vast number of organizations, it's about the apps that are running on top of it. So what you can do on top of the solution is what they care about. And so we say, it's applicable to a broad set of use cases. It's really around, hey, how can I start doing IT automation on top? How can I use this as a vehicle to ensure I have compliance? I can meet compliance requirements for my organization. They have private, specific regulatory or more federal or industry regulations. If I want to apply VDI on top of it, or microsegmentation use cases for specific apps, et cetera, right? How can I use this as a platform? That's the intent, right? And one piece I like to say that really kind of sets us apart is this notion of comprehensive documentation. And I mentioned the whole kind of life of the VBDs early on. These are really living, breathing documents. I know it's kind of used a lot, but these are different. These VBDs are different, right? They're validated designs, but they're different from what you know as a reference architecture, right? Or a reference architecture, typically you'll see out there in the market, right? Someone publishes it, someone can write their own, or a company writes one. We've written them too, right? But reference architecture is really kind of a point in time. There's sometimes a lot of hand waving and some pretty graphics and a couple, tables of information, and that only goes so far, right? It doesn't tell you about things like, what are the design objectives, right? Why did you make that decision? How can you justify that decision that was made? It doesn't get into typically the implementation, the depth of implementation details, right? Or how you operate it, or how you validate it and test it, and how you continually update it. So typically reference architecture is very static and stale, and they're really rarely updated. And that's one kind of big difference about the VBDs is we're constantly updating them. And you'll see some history in a little bit about where we're going and what we've done, and where we're going. But we're constantly iterating these to provide you guys the best information as far as architecture, and continually improving our designs. But we're not doing these in a vacuum. You don't have to buy these designs, right? You can get them in certain fashions, but they're all publicly available. It's all comprehensive documentation from, planning, prep, the bill of materials that you need, physical and virtual, to software, how you implement it across different regions, how you validate it, how you test it, how you ensure interoperability, and how you upgrade it. Those don't come in a reference architecture, right? Now, it's not to say you can't use the VBDs as reference architecture. Kind of goes back to one of my earlier statements is you guys in the community, you can begin to read these designs and kind of get some understanding of how these designs are being used and to learn some new techniques, really to help, in fact, accelerate your career and your knowledge of our products. In fact, I would say this is a great resource if you're studying for advanced certifications. I would say that working on these VBDs has actually accelerated my time to achieve some of my more advanced certifications like the VCIXs. So I would highly encourage you to read the designs. It will really help you, particularly in that VCAP CMA design exam, which is a bear. But these are very comprehensive documentation. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And like I mentioned, it's suited around use cases, right? And we like to say, how can we help our customers, our partners, and such get the value out of a software-defined data center faster. We're engineers. We like to focus on the plumbing, right, and how things stitch together. But once we do that, we have to think about at the higher level, how can we provide things like, hey, the application's running for my organization, right, or my customer, what have you. How can I apply disaster recovery scenario on top of that? How can I do things like, ensure I have compliance, right? Those regulatory things. And remote office, branch office, third-party integrations, et cetera. These are just a couple, 8 examples of really the outcomes that you would want to see sitting on top of a VMware validated design, right? And because that's really what it's all about. Once you did plumbing, you got the infrastructure. How do we now start adding on additional value on top of it for the people that are obviously paying for you to deploy this, right? Be the customer or your own organization.
Hey, Ryan.
Hope that makes. Yeah, man.
I actually have a question from Graham Mitchell. He says, should they be used more like as is, or can/should they be used as a basis for design?
That's a great question. I appreciate you answering that. So yes, I'll say yes to both, right? The intent is for the VMware validated designs to be consumed in a prescriptive format. We can talk about there's certain areas where we allow some deviation, and where areas where we're very prescriptive and where areas where we're not prescriptive. So the goal is for you to be as in line with the design as possible and not deviate and become another what we call sometimes, jokingly, another snowflake. I hate that term, but it's kind of a term everybody uses. But that's one way. We really want people to take them as a prescriptive approach. We also realize that not every organization can do that. But I will say, we'll talk about design decisions a little bit. And I have made the design decisions over 240 design decisions for these designs available as a checklist form, so you can go through them. And if you disagree with them, right, specific design decisions, you can kind of figure out where your off-ramp is, right? Where I don't agree with that, I have to make a deviation. And then, of course, we can discuss where that deviation is, and if it's okay deviation, you should still be pretty much in line, right? But there's certain areas. Outside of that, you know, like I said, you can use this as kind of a fundamental Kickstarter, right? Like if you say, this is great, but I want to make some modifications, you know, I want to put, instead of vRealize automation, I want to kind of modify this, use it as a basis for me to do a design, but I want to put VIO on top of it. Fine. Yeah, it's not, you're using it at that point as a reference architecture for your design, right? I will say, do not submit your VCDX defense based off this design. You will be frowned upon. They will quickly figure out what you did, so don't do that.
That should be a funny conversation. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't do that, right? And actually, in fact, we don't actually have requirements, assumptions, constraints, and stuff like that built into the design, you know, because those are all based on customer requirements. So, I do want to give you guys I'll put my, you know, my teacher hat on for a moment and kind of give you guys a quick history lesson of where we've come. In February of 2015, right? So I got to kind of go back. This is representative of last year. I bet that's Nick right there. Hold on a second. In February of 2015, we started this process. Nick says he should be on soon. 5 minutes. So we started this process in February of 2015, and 12 months before February of 2016. So in February 2015, we started engineering effort where we said we're going to take some of the best and brightest minds in the field and our engineering, and we're going to pull them together, and we're going to create a design for one of the best designs we can for a software-defined data center. 12 months of engineering work later, using folks like William Lamb, Nick Marshall, Eric Gray at the time. I'm going to forget a bunch of people. Even Justin King, I think, was on that team, and Randy Jones and others. Nick Gibson, right? Just brilliant guys.
I think
Kamal
if
was
I
on it as
remember
well.
correctly, one of the guys that did the design guide was on that team, right? Forbes.
Forbes is now on that, and I'll mention that. Great point. I will mention that where he came in. So we took all this collective knowledge and we said we're going to build the best SDDC design possible, and led by an incredible chief architect, Phil Weiss, and Blaine Christensen, and they have just done a phenomenal job leading this team. And 12 months later, we came out with VVD 1.0. You probably saw some information called, you know, IT Automation Cloud 1.0. We call it VVD 1.0 now. And it was kind of an internal release as far as not a lot of public documentation, right? Some stuff, some buzz. I did a demo on the BCDR aspect, but we released that. It was kind of went to professional services to implement, and we kind of want to get its feet wet. And it was very well received, especially internally by our professional services. And then we started working on the next release. And in July of last year, we released the VVD for SDDC 2.0. It was about 3.5 months of engineering effort. At this release, we actually made it really public. That's right, just before VMware last year, we made it public. We made the documentation officially public. We scoped down some pieces because we wanted to get it out before VMware, and we kind of said, there's some things we want to give and take on there. But we got out in late July of 2016. Well, then we started the process to do VVD 3.0. And that came, 2 months of engineering work later. And we added dual region support. We had dual region support in the first one. We had to make some changes in 2.0. 3.0, we brought dual region support. So think of, kind of New York and Los Angeles, or San Francisco and, LA, kind of. In fact, San Francisco and LA have seen in our documentation as examples. And we added disaster recovery between the two sites again. So that took us about, 2 months of engineering effort, right? We're starting to shorten the cycle because we've done the heavy lifting up front. Shortly thereafter, I will say just about that spot, right? A little bit before, Forbes Guthrie, right, from vReference, I think it's vReference.com. Very, been around the community for quite a long time in the forums and such. He joined VMware. It was the summer, I think it was the summer of last year, and he's a product manager for VBDs. Is today. He does an incredible job leading the direction of the VBDs from a product standpoint, and just the overall fantastic guy to work with. I was actually on a call with him yesterday. We were talking about my new content for the next version of VBD. So that's where Forbes comes in. So a little bit later, month and a half later of engineering, we started doing things like VBD 3.02, right? This is a minor release. Some minor changes in what we call the bill of materials, but you start seeing some of these shrinking in time frame, right? But what we added as well was another VBD specifically around the use case of microsegmentation. We added some additional scenario guides for how to build blueprints in vRealize Automation for how to use vRealize Automation in the context of the VBD. So we started adding more use case type stuff on top, right? And we're continuing to work on, and since then we have released some early access material on the VBD community for our 4.0 release, which will be coming at some point, soon. But it is an early access on the VBD community. It's you go to vmware.com/go/VBD-community, and we'll take you to the community. And there you'll actually find that checklist I mentioned. But we'll get more into that in a little bit. So that's a little bit of history lesson. You can kind of see how we keep accelerating. So VBDs, before we start, don't think that we're sitting in an ivory tower, dictating, how designs has to be done, right? And this is the only way to do it. This is just one design, right? VBD for SDOC. We've taken feedback from our field, our partners, our customers, community, and said, before we start building something, we kind of have to scope it, right? You have to do that with, your partner, your customer. You have to scope it, right? Otherwise, you have scope creep and things go bad, right? So what we did is we wrote down, and there's a couple different examples here. I'll show you straight from the documentation you can download. We said, what objectives do we want to define before we actually build a design? And so we lay down things like, hey, what type of deployment? Is this going to be a greenfield, brownfield? What's it going to look like? And we chose greenfield. And greenfield doesn't really necessarily mean it's a net new data center, right? It could be a parallel installation in an existing data center. Maybe you'll move your workloads over, but we're not like going in and retrofitting something you've already deployed and then ripping it around, kind of re-swizzling it, as my friend Adam actually likes to say, and to make it, a VBD, right? It's more of greenfield, move your stuff over, right? We support dual region workload domains, right? Dual region domains, we can support up to 10,000 virtual machines, right? Which you can obviously extrapolate, that's like the vCenter, or vCenter limit, well, at least in 6.0. And then 150 VM deployments per hour, right? That's what we call the churn rate. How many VMs can I spin up? How many operations can I take? That can be spinning up or tearing down, right? What's that churn rate need to look like? And then we also define things like availability. What does the availability percentages need to be for things like, SDOC, the management plane, the control plane, things like that, the user interfaces. How much downtime do we want to take per year, right? Right now we're targeting around 99% of availability. There are some areas where, certain pieces of the SDOC that we want to see more availability, right? You've probably seen some of those come out in the 6.5 release of vSphere, right, where we want to be able to add those and get a little extra availability for the platform. If you look at the 99%, that's pretty, maybe caused, by the availability of vCenter, right? We protect it with HA, but, we don't have, entire high availability in the 6.0 release. 6.5, yes, we do. Right? So those are some ideas.
Nick,
yeah.
Can we? Can I just add something to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, I'm late.
Everyone,
so in terms of
Nick Marshall coming in. Nick, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. All right. My name is Nick Marshall. I'm an integration architect working on these here validated designs for VMware. Been at VMware, 4.5 years, something like that. And original vBrownBagger, but haven't been around much lately. Too much other stuff going on, unfortunately. However, I did want to talk about the availability piece. And some people will say, whoa, 99%, that's, as you've got there, over an hour and a half downtime a week. That's crazy. Let me just talk a little bit about the background as to why we have that number there. So we've got a calculation in the background, and what it does is it goes through and it looks at all the different components that you've got that make up the entire SDDC, all the different management components that are in there and their individual availability capabilities. And then you've got the sum of those, and I can't remember the exact calculation off the top of my head, plus all the number of physical infrastructure pieces. And you add all of that up into this supposedly industry standard calculation, and when you take the sum of all of that, it equals 99%. So while there may be some components that will achieve more than that, what you have to do is you have to go, well, the lowest or the lowest amount of availability for a certain component plus the highest of others means that it comes out at that. Now, realistically, I don't know anybody that would be happy if they had over an hour and a half of downtime a week, or 1.7 hours of downtime a week. But realistically, I mean, the whole point of the validated design, which you've no doubt already touched on, is the fact that we've validated it. We go through extensive testing on this to make sure that we can sustain 150 plus VMs churning every hour for weeks on end to simulate years of uptime. So don't be afraid of it's only 99%. This thing's tested.
Very, very much so. Thank you. Thank you, Nick.
And we did have a question from the audience. When you are referring to dual region, does that encompass metro clustering? Was the question.
Nick, you want to take that one? I know the answer, but
Sure. So the reason that we started out with regions instead of sites is because we wanted to take the model that's worked well with AWS, having the difference between regions and availability zones, and then model our architecture around that kind of concept. So at this stage, we've got dual region. We haven't designed for dual availability zones and therefore clustering between availability zones or clustering between regions. That's something we haven't designed for yet. I know that it's definitely on the backlog of stuff that we're going to be looking at in the future, but at this stage we haven't looked at it.
Thank you so much.
You also see some of that discussion actually when you read the architecture guide, where it refers to the regions and the availability zones, and you see it in the design decisions as well when you read the architecture guide. So that's a little bit about, design objectives. We have to know what we're going to build for before we actually do anything, right? And then we kind of switch gears and put on our architect's hat, and we start having these lively discussions about design decisions, right? And we know what we want to build for, but now we have to start figuring out how we're going to build it. And I think this is regarding the 3.0 specific release with this number up here, but in the VBD 3. I think it's 3.0. I don't know if 3.2 has more, but there were over 230 design decisions in the VBD, and these are really around how can we go about thinking about every aspect of how we design it and documenting it, right? How can we create a baseline for everything we've decided to do, build a standardization, right? And really help to document things like, how can I easily go back and figure out, why did I make that design decision? Or what was the reasoning for that? What was the design decision, right? What was my justification for actually making that decision in the architecture? And of course, what other kind of implications could it have, right? Whether that be implications on other subsystems, on the existing system, or even on people, right? Or time or what have you. What are those implications? And then be able to document that and put that in a form that can be gone through as a checklist. In the architecture guide, it's not exactly as a checklist, but we have made a checklist available. You can download today from the community. But how can we make it really, really simple for you to understand? Hey, this is the design decision. This is what it is. this is why we did it, and here's what it may affect. And what it kind of looks like when it's laid out, it looks a little something like this. But they're always they're always located in our architecture guide today. Like I said, we do have these available in a checklist download from the community site. But you'll see here we got a decision ID, right? SDDC, that's the design. VI is virtual infrastructure. SDDN is the software-defined networking. And then you see like a numerical sequence, right? It's 01. This is the first design decision we made for virtual infrastructure for software-defined networking, right? Then we have the design decision itself, right? We decided to use 2 separate NSX instances per region, et cetera, right? That's the design decision we made. How do we justify that? And we write our justification, and of course any implications it may have for us, right? We now since we have dual region, we must install and perform the initial configurations for 4 NSX instances separately, right? That's our implication. So we document those, and kind of when you're reading through the documentation, I'll bring up a copy here. Like this is an example from the architecture guide, right? You'll see how they're listed, right? Here's all the design decisions, the design decision IDs, the design decision, justification, and implications. This happens to be from our early access documents for the next upcoming release. But you see how they're kind of put into a checklist form, and like I said, you can download them from the community website. This is just an example, again, just kind of like I showed you, specifically 3 design decisions from our software-defined networking for the routing model design decisions, and you'll see as you're going through the documentation, we kind of break those up, into virtual infrastructure, but under virtual infrastructure have software-defined networking, so you kind of go down and drill into the areas, and you'll see, this one's specifically for the routing model, right? So you're easy to follow and find, and we're going to see some things where we actually make it a little bit easier in the future. Any questions on design decisions?
Not that I see.
I like to.
Yep.
There's a guy. I don't know if folks know who Eddie Donnell is, but I particularly like Eddie's example because, I'm not young anymore. I'm not going to say this, but if you're a good engineer, you're a good architect. You can read like all 230 of these, and they. What made read, like he says, like a 1980s stereo manual, right? Or like a car repair manual. It may seem a little boring, but if you're a good architect or engineer and you read through these, you get a very good visual for what the architecture looks like. If you're kind of you can read this and come with a visual interpretation, you understand what the design looks like. And of course, we do make that a little easier. I don't know if I can bring one up here. We have all the design decisions, but as you go through our architecture guide, and of course one doesn't come up, but you'll see things like we provide you some logical diagrams, some images that actually represent what those are design decisions, and here's what it looks like, right? So you can start getting that mental picture of what the architecture looks like before you do it. And of course, we supplement that with the actual implementation guidance. Nick, you want to add anything on that?
Our diagrams are really pretty.
Nick did a lot of them. Nick did many of them.
No, one thing
I think that.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that there is a good mix of detailing there around, hey, you could follow all of these design decisions, and the reality is that you might be an expert in vSphere and NSX, but you might not understand the storage, you might not understand vSAN, or you might not understand the CMP layer. You don't have no idea on vRealize automation. So you supplement each thing with the information that you know and you understand. But there's certainly enough diagrams in there. And Ryan, I'm sure you'll show your big diagram at the end if you haven't already. There's enough information so that you should be able to go from, I know nothing about any of things. And if you read the entire thing, you should be able to get it up and running by yourself. The idea isn't that this is for full stack engineers only. We should be able to make you a full stack engineer at the end of it.
Exactly. Exactly.
The people that are studying for the VCAP design, and there's several, verticals for the design exam, and that ultimately go into the VCDX. When they grab a document like this, they find out stuff they hadn't even thought about. So we all appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, like I said early on, just the amount of work that I've been doing with the VBDs and having the pleasure to work with folks like Nick, it's really helped to advance my own certifications, right? All the VCX ones, the VCATs, and stuff like that. Especially, like the VRA, right? VRA to me has always been a bear. The VBD really helped me understand the architecture just behind the product, but also how to implement it and do it in a highly available way. And I can't stress enough. If you're studying for some of those exams, and even the NV exams, this is a great resource, an educational resource for you. And then you can start to adopt a lot of the themes that you see, right, into your everyday work, and hopefully be implementing the VBD one day. So as far as what we call the software BOM, or the bill of materials, right? Each release is going to have a specific bill of materials, and the VBD for SDOC really has these kind of 8 core components, right? They're going to be, obviously vSphere. I should change that to say vSAN and not virtual SAN. Finally, I need to do that. NSX, right? NSX for vSphere. Site Recovery Manager. You'll see VRA is used. VRA's automation. VRA's business for cloud. You'll see a use of VRA's operations, along with very specific management packs and content packs. I'll show you those in a moment, kind of give you an idea, as well as vRa's log insight and content packs, because that's our log analytics and aggregation, interactive analytics. I call it the last mile of root cause, because I usually hate looking at logs, but sometimes it's a necessity, right? And so what the stack kind of looks like is like this. This is kind of the base, what I call the core platform stack, and some people argue with this diagram, but I like it. At the core platform, right, there's vSphere, vSAN, NSX, right? You've got log insight, field operations, and then there is this thing that says vSphere data protection. Right? Let me call something out here in just a moment. Well, I'll call out on top of that core platform, we layer in now like the cloud management platform pieces, and we layer in some pieces around BCDR, right, disaster recovery and continuity. We use vRa's automation for a cloud management and automation platform. vRa's orchestrators in there is our workflow engine. vRa's business for cloud is going to give you that IT financial management and reporting, right, for people that care. How much does it cost me to run this thing, right? vSphere application is used because we do support a dual region design, and we actually support the ability to deploy the SDDC stack, the management stack, but be able to fail it over using all the goodness of vSphere, vSAN, and NSX, and combining that with vSphere application and Site Recovery Manager. So you want to pick up things like VRA, highly distributed VRA deployment, pick it up and move it to another region and reinstantiate it. Same with VRA's operations. So these are kind of the core components of the VBD for SDC. Down at the bottom, I kind of highlighted VMware vSphere data protection. In our docs, you will see, and Nick, keep me honest here, you'll see we have vSphere data protection used for backup and restore of the components, right? We wrote it in a way that it's not prescriptive, right? So that's why I kind of grayed it out here. It's not prescriptive. It's really kind of give you guidance of, hey, you may not have an existing environment. You may have existing investments in things like Commvault, Net Backup, Networker, what have you, right? We're trying to give you some guidance around, how you can do your backup and recovery. I apologize, I need to switch to my phone. My headset's starting to die. 1 second.
While you do that, I'll talk about VDP. So yeah, the idea is that the guidance is, it's still prescriptive. So we'll still tell you how to install it, how to design it, but what we've done is we've called out and said, well, this is just a VADP backup solution, right? It's not specific. You could implement the exact same backup procedures or the backup jobs with the same maintenance windows and the same VM groups in whichever backup solution you like. We test it with VDP, but we realized that is a product that has smaller market penetration than most backup solutions for various reasons, and therefore we didn't want to say, well, if you're not using VDP, you don't have a true VVD. We didn't want that to be a limiting factor. So it's a semi-optional, take it or leave it, but still use our backup general guidance.
Yep. You see I highlighted the change here, so it's really more around, how can you use the vSphere APIs for data protection, right? And you may see that in the future release, where we may be going more to focus on, V8EP. Fair enough, Nick?
So guys, I do have a couple questions. Basically, Graham is asking, what kind of business size are we looking for most of those VVD designs? I mean, he's guessing it's not for the SMB market. And also, if he wanted to deploy this in his lab, like if he wanted to go full as DDC, I told him that's probably going to be a big lab because you're talking about every VMware product. He wants some guidance there.
So I'll take a stab at it, Nick, if you want to pop in. Yes, I mean it can be a very big environment, but we have dual region, we have single region, or you can do dual region, right? You can deploy either. We've actually heard this similar feedback from the field and our customers. Before we had this whole concept of pods. We haven't got into that. We'll do that maybe on the next one. But it had a larger footprint to get started, right? It was at least, wanted to get started, you need like minimum of 12 hosts. This 3-pod architecture for a single region. Dual region obviously doubled that. We have shrunk it down to a starter with what we call a 2-pod design. Again, we'll get to that later. But the minimum footprint to get started is an 8 nodes, right? 8 nodes for a single region, 16 for a dual region support.
And when you say nodes, Ryan, you're talking about ESX hosts, just to be clear.
ESX hosts, yeah, ESX hosts, right? What you're going to put stuff on, and we break that into a management and then an initial shared edge and compute pods, right? And we'll get into that probably on the next show. But they do have some very specific requirements because the way we deploy is everything is really, we're trying to make sure we have availability. So we deploy vRealize automation, we're doing it in a highly available distributed fashion, right? Same thing with VRO and when deploying a lot of our key components, right? VROps, Log Insight. We want to make sure it scales to those, can it scale to 100,000, 10,000 VMs? Can it scale to 150 VMs being turned, per hour or more? So yeah, it is big. Now, doing this in your home lab, I think some people out in the community actually may be able to do it. I've seen some, pictures of these home labs, and they're quite impressive. I have seen people that want to do nesting, and you're not going to be able to get all of this onto I think Nick has written an auto lab for it yet, but it would be very difficult to deploy all this in a home lab. But you can make some concessions. I've actually deployed the entire VUD for a single region in an environment where we do some heavy nested virtualization called OneCloud. It's our own internal cloud. But what I did is I deployed it, I nested everything, and I stripped everything down so that I took all the redundancies out, right, in order to, play around with it, right, in a lab and be able to spin it up and down. That is possible, right, but you have to start stripping things down in order to get some testing. There's no reason you couldn't start following a lot of these pieces in your own home lab.
Excellent. Thank you.
Nick, you want to add anything on that?
Nope, just that we started big and we're going the other direction, so stay tuned.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, right? There is on the community, you will see on the community go out there is this whole concept of this technical preview for a paper that talks about a consolidated management and workload where we can actually make it a little bit smaller, right? We started big, right? We want to make the best SDDC possible. We've gotten a lot of feedback from the field of how can you actually make this smaller for the SMB, right? Or maybe I can start in a home lab. I can start learning this. And so we are taking that into consideration. With the time we have, I do want to talk about kind of dig into a little bit on the components, Nick, I am going to share some of the stuff on the 4.0 because it is an early access, and so I can officially share some of that.
Hey, I'm not marketing approved. Do what you like, man.
Right. But I will share a little bit, right? So all the 6, the 2.0, and the 1.0, 2.0, and the 3x releases were all regarding vSphere 6.6x, and we slowly incremented it. Here you can see some of the versions. Well, we have early access for 4.0, and you will see very, very soon a new VBD for SDC coming out, where you'll start to see what we call the kind of the 6.5 release wave, right, coming into play. So things with vSphere 6.5, updated data protection if you want to use it. You'll actually see it now. We're actually using Update Manager because it's built into vCenter. We provide guidance on that. vSAN 6.5, NSX, right? We just released a week and a half ago. 6.3 is built in. You'll see vRealize operations and these very specific management packs. We provide you guidance of, hey, these are the management packs for all these other SDC components: NSX, Log Insight, VRA, right? The management pack for storage devices, and the very specific ones that we're putting into the bill of materials and doing all our tested and continuous validation and our scale testing with. Right, so this is one of the first sets, and then we can obviously continue over. You'll see Log Insight's going to be revved up to 4.0, and its relevant content packs. We provide guidance on that. VRA, seeing that go into 7.2, as well as Orchestrator and some updates for vRealize Business for Cloud. So everything from that side, and that we'll call the vRealize suite side and such, is all kind of pushing toward that 7.2 train. Insight Recovery Manager also being incremented as well. I believe it's 6.5. I don't know if I have a mistake there or not, but that kind of shows you we're now going to be moving in the 4.0 release, moving that into the latest and greatest technologies that we announced at VMworld, and folks are starting to leverage. Any questions there?
No questions, but I really like that you're keeping everything updated. I know that by now people are
cool,
deploying stuff, so it's cool to see that.
Okay. Can I add one thing, Ryan?
Of course, man.
So one of the things that one of the benefits that I think that is really not necessarily made, well, maybe it is, but I really like the fact that when we do a rev, we will actually give you guidance on how to get between revisions. So we're giving upgrade guidance. So if you had VVD 3.02 in your environment today, we're actually going to give you step-by-step guidance on how to get to VVD 4 as part of the operational day 2 guidance. So you don't have to sit there and work through all the KB articles and get all the right patch and go, oh, is this build number compatible with that build number, and what will I sacrifice anything by going up? We will actually ensure that we give you, as my boss likes to say, we put you on the happy path.
Yes, he does. And that's not even just major revisions. We just kind of touch on that real quick. We did start introducing that also between some minor releases. So if you were on 3.0, right, VVD 3.0 for SDC, and decided you wanted to go to 3.0.2, we actually, in the release notes, upgrade guidance is in the release notes there as well. And now when we're going from these major versions, right, from vSphere 6 to 6.5, between like a 3.0.2 or a 3.x and a 4.x, we're providing that guidance for even those major upgrade versions, right? So we're not going to leave you, put you on the happy path, make it easier for you guys, our customers, our partners, everybody to go between versions. And how can we simplify it? Because if you've done it before, you're out there looking at KB, and you're just like, do I have to do my NSX manager before I do my PSCs, or do I do my vCenter? What's the order? And that, and then you throw in Site Recovery Manager and all these other pieces together, it can be this complex puzzle. How can we make it so much easier for you, especially as you have all these different integrated pieces of the SDC stack? Right? So I'll touch on a little bit on day 2 operations as we start to wrap this up. In the next one, we're going to dive deeper into the physical architecture and the virtual architecture, right? The virtualization layer and the physical layer, because I want to make sure we can answer questions as we go through these weeks. But we add a lot. It's not just one thing about deploying. You got to plan, you got to prepare, you got to implement the software-defined data center. Once you actually get it deployed, right, now you got to do something with it. You got to care and feed and update it, right? We go back to what we just talked about, but just things like monitoring and alerting, right? How can we help put you guys on the right path and an advanced path to how do you need to look at things like alert, right? Creating alerts, creating custom dashboards, notifications coming from Log Insight, and data, and what's the status of data protection. So, an example here, we actually create some very specific alert definitions inside of VROps, right? They're specific to the VBD. We walk you through that, and then of course you could learn from that to even create your own, right? That may be relevant as you add some very specific ones for your compute pods. But we put you on a guidance that, hey, add these alert definitions because they're important, but it also helps you learn how to do that, right? And in your day job. So if you need to add others or change some, you can do that. Dashboards, right? This is one of Nick's pieces of work right here. It's I don't want to say single pane of glass, but we do use that term sometimes. Is how can you look at the overall SDOC stack and how it's performing? Give you the easy way to say how's my memory CPU? How are all the pieces in that entire stack performing together, right? Is there memory contention? Is there CPU contention? Am I overcommitted? Right? What's going on? And build a dashboard that represents that easily inside of vRealize operations. Because sometimes it's a little bit of a tricky piece for people. How to get started, and we guide you on that path to laying this down, and then of course you can learn it as a jump box to say, hey, now I know how to do that. I can go do it for my compute workloads as well. Help define what the dashboards need to look like for compute workloads. But we provide you this, quote unquote, out of the box for the VBD management stack. Like I said, alert definition, event notifications. We walk you through some very specific ones that to kind of guide you on the path of these are definitions or notifications we create in vRealize Log Insight. So when we see an issue happening, maybe the VRA appliance is running out of disk space, right? Or you have a core dump. How can we enable it to send you a notification, right, up into Log Insight? Maybe get that over to vRealize operations, and then you can take the action upon that, right? So we define those types of elements. Business continuity, we provide things like what does operations then look like? How we automate it? How we orchestrate all the parts of your business continuity plan. So here I've got backing out, right? We use VDP as an example, right? You can follow that to the letter if you want, or if you're using something else, you can follow the guidance. You get an idea of how to back up and recover the entire SDOC management stack. Not too often you're going to see this. We need to start up your SDOC from scratch or shut it down. But we do provide you prescribed methods, and you both see some new cool stuff. I mean, you've read about 6.5 and some of the ways we approach in vSphere HA the startup and shutdown. And maybe you'll see in the next release how we're implementing those new features in 6.5 into the startup and shutdown for the SDOC stack. As we talked about earlier, patching and updating. How can we give you guys put you on that happy path, give you a prescribed order of pre-maintenance and post-maintenance, and an order of operations to go from one version of a VBD to another version, whether it's a minor version or a major version between those. Post-maintenance, what are validation steps? Yeah, man.
We actually did have a question on the patching side, since you just talked about it. So are these going to be like version specific, like only for VVD type patching, or basically what we're trying to get down to is doing a compare and contrast versus things like, say, a vBlock?
So these patching will be very specific to the VBD, right? So our guidance is, how do you patch this environment from going from version 3.0 to version 3.02. You might have had a minor change in the bill of materials, right, for an ESX, for VRA, right? What's the prescribed order, and what are the packages you need to use to make that minor increment from one build number to another in the VBD? Not saying you can't use it as an idea for how to do other environments, but they are going to be very specific to the VBD.
And Ryan,
can I just add to that? I'm not sure if my interpretation of the question was different, but one thing I did want to call out is that the BOM, the bill of materials, and the version of all of the software is standard VMware builds. Whatever you get from my.vmware.com and you download This is no different. So we're not giving you specific patches for issues that are found within the VVD, because quite frankly, we're using the same software to build the VVD as what you can download and install yourself every day of the week. There's no differences there.
And just to be crystal clear there, this is guidance. It is not a script. It is not you're not provided with a script and installers that you can just run. This is guidance on how to do it yourself.
It is.
Yeah, yes.
Awesome.
If you're a partner, it might be a different story. We actually make it a little easier for some of the partner services to do, but that's a whole other topic you can find on an upcoming VM Live if you're a partner. Good question though. Yeah, so one thing that I believe we show, we have the major versions, but also in the release notes we actually show the build number, right? So it's the same build numbers you would get as well. Now, my only caveat that I would probably particularly lay down is, listen, if you're using vSAN ready nodes, right, and you have a specific build recipe for those vSAN ready nodes for management stack, probably not a good idea to go just download the ESX image from VMware.com. You're going to want to get the one that's specific for that specific recipe for that host, but it matches up to the same build number that we have. So if you're using Dell, right, go get the Dell image of ESX to deploy and make sure you're applying the specific recipe for those vSAN ready nodes, right? Specific BIOS settings, firmware settings, etc. And so if you want to get started, right, like I mentioned earlier on, there's this public documentation. It's ready, available. You can go grab it today. You can go to vmware.com/go/vvd-sdc. I'll show it in a minute. And you can download the docs. There is professional services for this, so whether it's our certified partners that can do it, or VMware Professional Services, they have deployment kits and they can actually go and deploy this and do it really quickly because they do have another toolkit to automate pieces of this instantiation, which is really nice for the partners. And we do have certified partner architectures as well, where folks like Accenture, for example, has taken the VVD and now they are deploying services built around the VVD for SDDC. 3.0 is one that they're currently working on. So they're building that and deploying it for our service for our customers as well. The documentation, right? So the documentation is freely available. You go to vmware.com/go/vvd-sdc. It takes you right down to the download page where all these docs are available in PDF format. You may see additional formats coming in the future, but you'll see, like with every product, right? We have release notes, right? What's changed, what's new, build numbers, a BOM is in there, the architecture guide, which I encourage you to read, diagrams, planning and prep, implementation guidance, validation, monitoring, business continuity, all those pieces are built in, and the documents are readily available. You can go download them, the entire stack today, and begin reading those, and I encourage you to do so. There is this poster out there. If you go to vvd-sdc poster, this is kind of a high-level architecture. It takes a lot of the core elements. You're not going to be able to zoom in and read this today, but you can download it. I'm sorry, there's no printable copies. I could not get budget to print these. But you might be able to take them to your area Kinko's, FedEx Kinko's, and get them printed. But they really kind of digs into the core tenets of a lot of the design principles and kind of takes a lot of those pieces that you would see in the architecture guide and picks out the high points of things you need to understand, whether it's the platform services, how NSX is delivered, the idea between what is a pod architecture, or how does leaf and spine network look, how are we providing L2 within the rack, what does the distributed switches look like, even down to how at the bottom there, how the bottom left area, how we're doing distributed logical networking with NSX, right, and how we're actually putting the SDDC solutions like vArray, vRO, Log Insight, vRealize operations on top of NSX, because then we can do cool things like be able to move them around between regions during a disaster event. So you can download this today. Encourage you to check that out, and we hope to have a revision very soon for our next release. And kind of with that, I think are we at the top of the hour yet, Ariel? Or
Well, we're technically at the bottom of the hour, but
yeah,
we are
this is
we are approaching the end of the hour.
Yeah, this is a good moment to stop since you sent out the links, and I think those will help a lot of people start reading.
Yeah, so that's where we kind of want to stop here, and where we're going to pick up next, and I'll give you a preview, right? So where you guys can go begin downloading some of this material, and I'll see if I don't show all my 4.0 stuff here. Where we'll try to pick up next is start to dig in a little bit on the physical infrastructure, right? We're kind of leaving off of what do we need for physical infrastructure? What are the ideas regarding these pods? So I want to dig into the physical infrastructure, what's the layout that need to look like? And then we'll start digging into things such as the concept of the virtual infrastructure, how we create these pods of infrastructure, what do they do, what are their roles, how are they laid out, and we'll dig into the physical infrastructure and the virtual infrastructure on the next go around next week.
All right. So one thing I'll do before we stop the recording, I'll open up microphones. If anybody wants to ask any questions, just raise your hand using the interface, and I'll open up your microphone.
Well, so we did have one last question that was, specifically for Nick, and that was around the Mastering vSphere series and whether or not there was going to be a new version for 6.5.
Wow, I I get that question a lot. Maybe I need to post an FAQ or something. No, I'm not doing a Mastering vSphere for 6.5. Maybe you heard it here first. Officially, no, I'm not doing a Mastering vSphere 6.5. However, I know that there are other publishers that are doing Mastering vSphere-esque type books for this release. So you might like to check out the other works that are available. This is my new book, effectively. I mean, I'm one of many authors, but I tell you what, there's more work that's gone into this than there has been into Mastering vSphere. That's for sure. This is a tome. Over 1,500 pages. Mastering vSphere is like 850 odd pages, 900 pages. This thing is almost double that now.
I bet you feel this is like the evolution, right?
Yeah, well, it's all the products, not just one, right?
Exactly, and mastering everything.
Like I said earlier, if you read through these docs and you go through it, you really learn an epic amount of information across all the products and why things, how we use it and why we use it in that way. I will say there's also there's lots of videos out there, right? We've got some. If you go to the VMware.com, go to YouTube.com/VMware. Look at the VBD playlist. There's a bunch of videos out there that I did, some conceptuals and demos to kind of walk you through this architecture, key pieces of the 2.x and 3.x architecture. Hopefully we'll update those for 4.x and some of the upcoming changes, but you'll learn a lot, right? It's very educational. There is a hands-on lab too. That's a simulated lab that kind of gives you a walkthrough. You go to the VMware, the VMware hands-on labs, and you can launch that lab anytime. It's a simulated environment, but it's walking you through the architecture. The items that you actually see here on the page, we walk you through a lot of those bits, so you can kind of get a better understanding of the architecture. There's tons of resources out there for you.
That's awesome.
It's about the fourth time I've heard Nick say that he wasn't writing that book. I think you had a baby between. You didn't have a baby after you wrote the last book, so that's taking up some time as well.
I seem to have babies and move house, or while I'm writing books. I'm crazy.
Yeah, well, move from California back to New Zealand, or Australia.
New Zealand, that's heresy. For those that don't know, I'm back in Australia now, so.
It's morning for you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. I'll stop the recording now.